Howdy, of you delicious people. I'm here today to review the 2011 prequel, sequel, remake of the movie The Thing. Reasonably within this movie, ultimately to me, it didn't feel like it didn't feel like a remake of the John Carpenter movie, which I kind of feel like this was presented as so. I ultimately feel that this movie was just basically, um, kind of doing a preemptive John Carpenter movie. Like the movie that came before the John Carpenter film was kind of this one. Within this movie, I'm gonna go and talk about it in a cryptic like sense, give you a double 5 time count, and then get into spoiler sense about this movie. Uh, Within this film, it is much more of a. I would go out of my way to say that this film is much more of a effects movie, much more so than the John Carpenter movie was. It really tries to completely make you forget there is a story because it feels like it doesn't have one. There is very much like a rush to be able to get to the alien parts, a rush to be able to not leave people in suspense. And that's ultimately how I feel about this 2011 movie, The Thing. Ultimately, when looking at it, it is like you don't get to invest in any of the characters, which kind of makes the entire movie like the investment is kind of pointless at a lot of points in time. In my mind, um, some of the characters, like if they did have a name, what were they? Because ultimately, it doesn't really quite matter. Um, Ultimately, looking at it, it's nothing is besides the effects. There's not much going on in the John Carpenter film. There are scenes in between the, let's just say, effects where you can ultimately just go, yeah, I like this film. I enjoy it. I enjoy it for the whenever there isn't effects. Within this movie, you're just kind of waiting for the next effect because there's nothing else going on. Um, Within this film, it is very much reminiscent of the other Thing movies, just because how much can you drastically change? Um, Really, there is much more of an alien presence that is present within this movie, and then it kind of goes into mixing into other people. It doesn't really. It also has to give you this big alien spacecraft within this film, which I kind of was just like, yeah, of course it does. Um, because that's 2011 for you. It has to give you some big spacecraft. It has to give you some big elaborate thing. Um, it just can't be simple, and I think that's what hurts this movie the most. Is it can't be simple. It can't be simple. It can't be slow going like the other films were. Ultimately, uh, I enjoyed the cast for what little time their presence actually mattered. I thought the effects were so much more gruesome than some other things in the other film because it kind of had to because that's all it had. Um, that's all it had to. Otherwise, just let you know that hey, this is a Thing movie is realistically just effects. When when looking at this, it's I would rather say if this is the only thing that people have seen from the franchise of The Thing, because there's been 3 movies of these, definitely go back into the John Carpenter, Kurt Russell movie, or go into the even black and white, The Thing from Another World. I haven't seen the black and white thing from the other world, but I kind of want to, just because of how kind of maybe a little bit disappointing this movie was. I enjoy subtlety. I enjoy like mystery, and this movie didn't really give me that. It didn't give me that at all in spades. I was assuming if this was kind of a prequel to the John Carpenter movie, The Thing, that ultimately it would end to transition to where John Carpenter's The Thing would go. Would make sense. Um, yeah, I think that is all very much that I have to say about this movie in spoiler in cryptic like terms. Because yeah, it's there's not much to talk about this movie in a very cryptic like sense. Because it's just effects. Um, and of course, there are actors of which that are in this movie that I think were looking at this and just going, "Oh my god, this is a big movie. I need to be in this because it's a big film." But what else was about it besides it being a big film or an iconic film? Or maybe um, the actors or actresses had seen this like 1,000 times. Maybe, who knows? Within this movie, also, I feel that we really don't get any kind of like how you can figure out how the monster is. There is a very much difference of way to figure it out, but it also goes into, well, but we're still not sure. They don't even try to do stuff that the John Carpenter movie did. They just go like, well, here's our different take on figuring out who the creature might be. And then ultimately, when that doesn't quite work well for themselves, then ultimately whoever eventually does get to spring into action as the monster is just kind of like, oh yeah, a lot of people like quickly. I think within this movie they wanted to have characters in this film just to kill them off because ultimately that's kind of blatantly how I feel is or do yeah, it was all about effects and that's all it was, sadly enough. If you wanted to just get an effects director and throw the script out, then bravo, you did that. You achieved that. But I believe there could have been other ways to try and get into this. You could have had a much more thorough script than any of the other films. There could have been much more like I think they had to dissect an alien creature and I was like, okay, great, you did that, but what was the point of the film of doing that? There was no point. There's so many times going through this film there was a lot of no point of doing certain things. Felt like a waste. Um, and it probably was just because it's like, well, this is a much shorter movie. We couldn't go slow and methodical, so it just had to be all that mattered was pushing. Maybe in all honesty, maybe because I know there was the game coming out. Maybe they just wanted to push another one of these movies out there. So dare say it probably suffered because of that. It just suffered because of just yeah, we maybe there's a game coming out, so ultimately we just want to take from the game and use effects from that game to here to just try to get another one of these out there. So without a doubt, that's all I could say. A very cryptic like sense. I can. That's almost what I could say as a movie as a whole because looking at the spoiler sense, there isn't much to get into that I probably haven't really already mentioned. So I think it's about that time to get into spoiler territory and talk about this movie in a very viciously spoiler like sense. Which I don't even know how far I'm going to go with that. So, going into it, we're going to be talking about The Thing 2011 in a spoiler like sense. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this movie. So I wouldn't say this is a bad film. I would say it's kind of irrelevant. It just like really, if you just want to really be like, you want to go to a movie and it's just, that's all it is. That's all it is. Like you have people whose faces are being like separated. You have creatures that are losing arms and then added appendages and stuff like that. You have um, faces and bodies blending into one another to make some kind of really ugly uh, effect. But again, it's not enough because what is the story? I do really like that it does seem like in this movie that a lot of times everybody is really out for themselves. It does really seem much more like that, or you have the creatures that are ultimately swaying people to just kill everybody because they're the creature when they're actually not. Um, how I felt about a female being put in this movie, I kind of just like, I kind of just go, well, of course you kind of have to add that in. You kind of have to, like, you have to. Otherwise, people are going to complain that there's not a female presence in this movie. And it's I guess 2011 in this time frame, so I guess like yeah, there has to be female in here somewhere. Um when looking into this movie, I would just say that excuse me, how they kind of went into the fact that like there are ways to dare say leave. There's a helicopter. There's trucks. There's something like that. In the John Carpenter movie, we had the doctor that destroyed all the helicopters, all the stuff to get away and go somewhere else. In this movie, we don't have that. At any point in any time, anybody could just honestly leave. If they're the creature, they could easily and quickly have taken the helicopter or the a car and just drove away, and then that would be like, oh, the thing's getting out. Because yeah, nobody destroys a helicopter. No one destroys a um, no one destroys any of the car things, whatever those are, like the snow wheel driving thing. I don't know what they're called. Um, they're cars. Nobody. Ultimately, at the end of the day, like one of the things does take one of the cars, but I think that's ultimately just to get into his ship eventually, or that's technically what he does. Where where we have it in this film, where it always has to end up having two people left, kind of like the other film, where there has to be two people left. I can't help but also felt like there had to be one person left, and bizarrely, it had to be the woman. Because in every horror movie, a woman has to survive. Uh, I thought it was like super goofy the entire time, to where um, the man that was the between the woman and the guy that was left to fight these creatures, how the entire time he was like wielding an axe the entire time. I'm like, this does not seem right. I'm like, this guy knows full well that why not grab a flamethrower, because there's so many very few people left. But then on top of that, it's like an axe just won't do the job. But looking at it, like something like that, that doesn't quite, that I guess just that sticks out to me, I guess sticks out to nobody else. Um, when looking into this movie, And seeing that there has to, of course, be this gigantic creature that's, ooh, yeah, look at me, I'm scary. I'm this gigantic creature. I was just like, well, of course they have to go this way because there has to be a consistent like climaxing of like bigger and bigger and bigger to where it doesn't make sense anymore. And but then also you have to have that last turn of suspicion as well. I I also just kind of really I just kind of bizarrely also look at you have one guy that otherwise like only speaks one language. And so anybody who speaks the right language will ultimately get this guy to do anything. Ultimately, that guy is otherwise just meant to be killed because he's the only one. He's the only one that can only speak one language, and sadly enough, nobody who is English speaking goes out of the way to try to learn some things of his language so they can ultimately try to survive in this thing. What if him and this girl were the only one left and he couldn't even speak her language? What a burden. What a burden. Anyways, so we we have it to where straight up it does seem like there are some characters in this movie that are already more important than others, especially for like certain kind of famous American actors. I'm like, well, I don't really know. Like, I really know this guy, so I think he'll take a long time to die. And oh, I know this person, so they'll probably take a very long time to die. Oh, this person is a woman out of all this group of men. She'll probably take a severely long time to die. Um, it's not it's not easy to or it's not difficult to be able to make this a very paint by numbers movie to where ultimately you can just rationalize in your head, well, there's only one woman in this movie. Seems like she's getting a lot of camera time. Man, if there was one mystery that should have been at the very end, it should have been that the girl was the thing, because no one would have expected this girl to have so much camera time and then her ultimately to be the thing and have to be killed at the end of all of this. That would be one interesting way to be going about this entire thing of just putting the the wool over everyone's eyes. The person who is most getting into trying to figure out how all these things go about it is the perfect disguiso, the perfect like the person trying to figure this out is the best disguise. So yeah, I just ultimately just felt that it was like that was a giant missed opportunity, but I think a lot of this movie was a giant missed opportunity. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, that's all I have to really say about this movie, and I didn't have very long to much say it. So I'm gonna get out of here. Bye everybody. Bye everybody.